Citadel episodes are always very interesting. It is no wonder that one of the highest rated episodes in the whole adult animation is based on them, and I will have to admit, even though it was not as good as the previous ones, because, let's be honest, it is extremely hard to top them since the bar is so high, this episode still delivered some new interesting lore additions and introduced several interesting characters who might play a big role in the future, so without further ado, let's dive into it. The episode starts with Rick and Morty scavenging through the ruins of the Citadel, but they're suddenly hit by wreckage and are forced to land on a nearby asteroid. Before landing, they see Morty Town, which is built in a Western style. Morty is confused to see all these different Mortys hanging out with each other. Since Rick restarted the Portal Travelers in the Solar Rigs episode, they were supposed to return to their original dimensions. However, because they are just clones and do not have original dimensions, they were brought back to the Citadel. After landing, we meet Homesteader Rick, who is not very welcoming to the other Rick and Morty. After Rick leaves, we don't see him and Morty for much of the episode. Instead, the story shifts focus to Homesteader Rick. We see how moderate and normal his life is compared to the other Ricks we've met throughout the series. He is taking care of weird, clone-like beings, and it appears he's using corn crystals to create some kind of water, or at least liquid. He then goes to the arcade, where he meets the second important character introduced in this episode, Arcade Morty. Arcade Morty is a very interesting individual. From the start, it's clear how different he is compared to other Mortys. Certain actions from him strongly remind the viewer of Evil Morty, the way he talks back to Rick while almost all other Mortys are submissive, and how he's ready to take charge of other Mortys. These are traits we've seen in Evil Morty before. Arcade Morty, along with Evil Morty and Morty Prime, seems to be one of the three main Mortys introduced in the series. However, there's a fundamental difference between them. Evil Morty and Prime Morty sit at opposite extremes. Morty Prime shows extreme loyalty and simply follows his Rick, while Evil Morty is totally independent and rebellious with no regard for helping others. Arcade Morty, by contrast, might represent a balance. He doesn't attach himself to a Rick, but he also doesn't isolate himself like Evil Morty. It took Evil Rick the whole Unmortricken episode to realize that not all Ricks, C-137 in this case, are the same, while Arcade Morty quickly realizes that Homesteader Rick is different and is not afraid to use his help to save others. In the end, his trust in Homesteader Rick is rewarded, as Rick's sacrifice allows Arcade Morty to free the other Mortys and escape the asteroid. While Arcade Morty's backstory is fabricated, Homesteader Rick seems to have a much deeper and more genuine history with the Citadel. We already know from the Rick Mirai Jack episode that the Citadel was creating countless Morty clones, as it was easier than breeding them naturally. The character in charge of that operation was none other than Homesteader Rick. According to Boss Hog Rick, Homesteader Rick is the Citadel's former head of Morty replication. Not only that, it seems he created the Mortys of Morty Town after the Citadel's destruction based on a conversation in the episode. Why would he do that? It likely ties back to his own Morty. He clearly cares for Mortys. Besides C-137, he's one of the only Ricks who shows genuine affection for his grandsons, even though they're clones. Perhaps something tragic happened to his Morty, which led him to master cloning in order to recreate his grandson. Over time, he may have felt responsible for the tortured lives these Mortys lived. If he hadn't helped the Citadel create them, they wouldn't have suffered. The guilt may explain why he returned to the Citadel wreckage and settled near Morty Town, to look after them in case something happened, which it ultimately did. Even though this Rick seems more normal and stable than others, there's still a darker side. He shows no remorse for killing other Ricks or when Mortys are captured, yet he's devastated when his hybrid clones are killed. Based on his expertise, he could have created perfect clones of animals, but he chose to keep disfigured pets. Their deaths moved him so deeply that he destroyed the new Citadel. This episode also emphasizes how rare it is that C-137 invented his own portal fluid. It recontextualizes the first Citadel episode. Most Ricks in the Citadel lacked the skills of even the most basic versions. That's why factory worker Rick was so miserable. He was created for a specific task and lacked the autonomy to leave, even though it seemed possible on paper. The Citadel deliberately created an underclass, which fits with the themes of exploitation. Several interesting Ricks appeared in this episode. One resembles Rick Prime, but he dies quickly. Another, similar to Doofus Rick, ironically leads scientific experiments despite being ridiculed in the past. Then there's the Rick clone who serves as the episode's secondary antagonist, alongside Boss Hog Rick. Unlike the other clones who only want a single teleport, this one wants to use the portal gun freely. He even creates a bootleg version before being killed by Boss Hog Rick. Another major reveal: who created the Rick clones. While Homesteader Rick is a cloning expert and the only one capable of creating Mortys, he reveals during his fight with Boss Hog Rick that creating Rick clones required collaboration and delegation. He gave notes to higher-ranking Ricks who then produced the clones. The episode also deepens the lore around portal fluid. Not all Ricks can use portal guns. We saw this in the Ricklantis mix-up, where bootleg portal chemist Rick attempts interdimensional transport but dies due to faulty fluid. Most Ricks relied on the Citadel for refills, making the fluid extremely valuable. Even C-137 struggled to regain full portal functionality after the Citadel's fall. Boss Hog Rick uses portal fluid as currency, but it's unclear where he got it. He likely wasn't smart enough to create it and couldn't have stolen it after evil Morty drained the supply. Someone clearly gave it to him to help rebuild the Citadel and use him as a puppet leader. Not all Ricks died after the Ricklantis mix-up. In Rick Fending Your Mort, we see 12 surviving Ricks. In Unmortricken, 5 more appear. It's very possible that a powerful, secretive Rick could emerge as a new villain, possibly replacing Rick Prime. However, this episode also feels like the writers closing the door on the Citadel saga, much like they did with Rick Prime. I'm glad it's wrapping up. It was starting to feel overused. Now, only 2 major plot threads remain: Evil Morty and Mr. Nimbus. Nimbus has ties to Rick's past and Diane, while Evil Morty possesses the series' most powerful weapon, the Omega device. How will he return if the Citadel is destroyed and his plan failed? Perhaps the desire to rebuild the Citadel was driven by a need to create an army of Mortys to stop evil Morty, since Mortys are the only beings he cannot use the Omega device on without sacrificing himself. That could be his Achilles heel. This might force him to ally with Rick, C-137, and Morty Prime to destroy the Omega device. It's a compelling way to bring evil Morty back. That said, I don't expect this storyline to resolve this season. Evil Morty has only appeared in odd-numbered seasons, 1, 3, 5, 7, so he may return in season 9 if the pattern continues. The writers often ignore the comics, but in the final comic arc, we meet the Illumerics. They manipulate comic villain Peacock and Rick's Morty to catch Rick off guard. Their plan? Separate Rick from Morty, brainwash Morty, and distract Rick so they can drop a universe bomb, a device created by Cold War-era wizard Rick that can annihilate an entire universe. Rick realizes what's happening and travels to the Illumerics universe. He kills 5 of them and interrogates one, who tells him only Rick's heart can defuse the bomb. Rick tries to use a clone's heart, but it fails. He realizes he's grown attached to this universe and his Morty, something he despises. Despite his sacrifice and emotional growth, the universe is still destroyed. It's revealed that the Illumerics were founded by Doofus Ricks, the true puppet masters who manipulated Rick's ego. Doofus Rick could be one of the first to team up with Prime. Prime may have underestimated all Ricks based on his experience with Doofus Rick, leading to his superiority complex and tendency to supply others with portal tech. Doofus Rick hasn't appeared in the show since season 1, despite his major role in the comics. Making him the secret mastermind would be a great twist and add depth to his character. Homesteader Rick might return despite his apparent death due to his advanced healing techniques. However, reviving him could diminish his sacrifice, as he's one of the few Ricks who earned redemption. The character I most expect to return is Arcade Morty. His future is open-ended. That he didn't go to a specific planet but returned to Homesteader Rick's house suggests the writers have plans for him, perhaps finding portal fluid and exploring other dimensions. He might even team up with C-137 and Morty Prime. Also, we shouldn't forget that Rick was scavenging Citadel ruins at the start. He's likely working on a secret project involving Citadel materials. The project could be for protecting his family or destroying the Omega device. Either way, something big seems to be brewing. Rick appears aimless after Rick Prime's defeat, which is unusual. The last time he was like this was at the end of season 6, when it turned out he'd been working on a secret weapon. So a similar arc may be forming now. Though this season started slow, this episode suggests a major revelation on the horizon.